Hello. In today's slow stitching video, I'm going to show you how I make an autumn leaf sampler. Now this is a fun technique using samples of fabric that you have. Just take some fabric that you like, particularly autumn themed fabric if you have it, but if you don't, colors that will coordinate nicely will work as well. You can even use scraps of fabric. We'll cut them down to size, adhere them with various stitches to our work. You can use a straight stitch or a running stitch, any stitch you like, and I'll show you how I do that as well. And then we'll stitch line art on top of it, and it will be a line art leaf. This is really fun and simple because you can make just a leaf like you would a pencil sketch. You can make a teardrop shaped leaf with a little stem, and then we'll do some veining. And the effect is pretty dramatic for such a simple project. So let's get started. So to make my autumn leaf sampler, what I do is I create a background and then I embroider just a very makeshift abstract autumn leaf. And it really is like a skeleton of the leaf. It's just the outline. It's very simple, but it really pulls the whole thing together. And it's really actually a very beautiful effect. Now to start this procedure, I find different samples for the background, and that's how it becomes the sampler. You could just have an assortment of samples of your fabrics that you love here. These are all autumn colors, oranges and browns. They're quite lovely. Or you can create a pattern. And here I have some beautiful fabric, autumn-inspired colors, the orange and yellow here and this beige. Either way, it's up to you, whichever direction you want to take it in. You can even choose the size of the sample pieces you have, if you want to have small ones or larger ones, and really playing around with how much distance you have between them. So there's a lot of variation for this project. So let's get started right away. The first thing is to choose your fabric pieces. So I have just a little piece of quilted material here, and that's my background. And this is what I'll attach my sample swatches to. I have two fabrics that kind of coordinate quite nicely. They have autumn colors, and they also have this pop of blue. Since I'm partial to blue, I really found this enjoyable. To make my leaf, which is the next stage, I chose a nice blue color. It'll coordinate, but it'll also stand out. And then to stitch my samples down, I'm just going to use some of this neutral pearl here. It's a little shade deeper than my background, but I think it will help ground everything. So now I have to select what size I want to create my little sample pieces. I like to use the big squares, but it's up to you. They can all be the same size or they can be different. This particular fabric has squares already, but I don't want to use their squares, so I'm just going to really cut them up. So what I like to do is create a square that I like the size of first, and then I use that as my template. And it doesn't even have to be a perfect square. I just want to make sure that I get a number of them the same size. And because this fabric is so different throughout, I can use this fabric exclusively, or I can bring in the other fabric as well. So I'll cut an assortment of these blocks, and then we'll play around with designing it. I just use my previous cut square as a guide, and then I can just cut a few more. So here are my blocks cut out. Now I'll just decide how I want them to go right on my piece here. Now the blocks won't fit in perfectly, so I might have to cut them down a little bit further. So now I've trimmed my blocks a little smaller, and now I can just place them where I want them on this piece here. And I can do them 3 tall. So I'll just play around with the design until I come up with something that I really like. I think I'll just stick with 2 rows, so I'll move them into the center here. And I like the way that looks. I might swap one out here for maybe another piece of this flowery design. But this is the process, and you take your time creating what you want from your piece. Now from here, I want to tack them down. Now to do that, in the previous ones, I've just tacked around the outside. So you can do that, or you can vary it however you want. But for this one, I think I want to do it old-fashioned, where it goes around the edge so it looks like patchwork. I'm just going to take a little bit of a glue stick just to hold my pieces in place. I'm only using a little bit of glue, and I'm only going in the center of where I want to put down the squares, just because it's a temporary measure. I also know I'm not going to be sewing through the center until I start adding my leaf embroidery. I'm only using a little bit of glue, and it should only temporarily hold my pieces down. I could also use pins to do the same thing, but I tend to get stuck with the pins. So I like to have a couple of measures. So now you want to tack it down doing whatever format you like. I'm going to do that old patchwork stitch. So I'll just start up top here, right on the edge of one of those blocks, and just come out a little bit, just with a straight stitch, and I'll continue all the way around, creating all the stitches that I need to hold it in place. So I'll show you a row. Each stitch is going parallel to the next one, and I'm only spacing it, oh, maybe a 1/4 inch apart, maybe a slightly less. And when I come to the end of that row, I can decide if I want to go over the corner, but I'm just going to turn it around just at a 90-degree angle and continue stitching. And I'll do the same thing on all 4 sides of this block. So now I finished sewing around this one block. I have a little bit of thread left on my needle, so I'll just continue and then sew around the remaining blocks, and that will complete the background of my sampler. And we'll take a look at that when I'm done. So here I've tacked down all of my sampler squares to my backing. Again, you can vary the size and even the shape if you want, and of course with the stitches. So here's the back. You can see I just stitched all the pieces down, kind of in a haphazard fashion. So now I want to add my top layer, and this is just my skeleton leaf. You can make it as simple as I've done here, with just a teardrop shaped leaf and then some veining. You can add multiple leaves, or you can add any type of leaf, abstract or real. Here I'm using a heat erasable pen, just from the office supply section, and I think I'll just sketch a rough leaf here, maybe coming out a little. And then from here I'll just embroider these stitches. And so here I have my stem, and then I'll just do some veining. Now I'll just take my blue thread, and I chose the blue based on the colors here, but you can use any color you want. Just wanted something nice and neutral. And then I'm going to stitch my stitches here. I'm going to start at the base of this leaf, and I'm just going to stitch a split stitch. So I make a single stitch, whatever length I want, and then I'm just going to come up through that stitch. And I like this stitch because it creates a straight line. In my stitches, there's no spacing between stitches. And if I come back in and really split that stitch, it evens out that line. So I'll just go straight up, creating that vein first. And because I want that stem to be a little thicker, I'll stitch 2 layers on it. Now, sometimes that thread moves, so I have to make sure I split it by coming through it. And as I get to the top of the leaf, I'm less interested in the thickness. I want the vein to thin out as it gets to the top. So I'll just make larger stitches, again splitting that stitch each time. Until I come up to the top of that vein. And the beauty of using the single color is it's easy enough to come back if I realize I didn't make the stitch long enough, or the ultimate image, the vein, long enough after I'm done stitching the outline. I'm stitching right through the background as well as those sampler blocks of fabric that we added. So I think I'll do one more stitch just a little ways up here. And now I'm going to jump over here to the outline of the leaf, only because my thread ended up over here. And I'm going to come around, I'm going to make smaller stitches because I'm going to start adding curves to my design. Still going to split stitch, and I'm still following the shape that we made on that outline. So right here, I'm going to start my next part of the leaf. So I'll come around here. Again, keeping the stitches a little smaller than they were for when I was making that straight line of the vein. And that way I can make those nice rounded curves. I can use my thumb to manipulate the stitch ever so slightly. And I get the nice arc that way. So I'll continue with this stitch all the way around, creating that leaf shape, and I'll show you how it looks when it's complete. So I finished stitching all the way around the leaf here with that blue. I made a little double section here just to thicken the stem of the leaf. And there I have my completed autumn leaf sampler. And I just wanted to show you all three versions really quickly. But it's just the same premise, just different ideas. You want a simple leaf, just the outline of it and the veining, just to indicate that it's a leaf. And then you can have very interesting background samples. And I really think that looks very pulled together. So that's how I create my autumn leaf sampler. It's just something fun that reminds me of autumn in a simple way. The colors are beautiful, the steps and the stitches are so soft and inviting. It's a really nice project. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And if you create one of these projects, post it on Instagram and be sure to tag me. Thanks for joining me today.